what's so fascinating about prizes is that at a time, say, starting in kind of the mid to early 1500s, society was really structured around this idea that class and standing really determined your access to capital, your access to resources. And what they would do is they would say, okay, it doesn't really matter if there was a problem that was so pressing, either through war, famine, pestilence, that they had to solve the question quickly, is they would come out and they would offer a prize. And they would say, okay, we give up. It doesn't matter where you went to school, it doesn't matter who you know. If you can solve the problem, you win fame and fortune. And that was the whole notion behind prizes. It was really an effort to kind of open the innovation process and really kind of bring in new mind share and new investment. And since there was fundamentally this failure, this vacuum, it didn't take a lot of money to get new people to play around and to try to win these prizes. It was their one chance to kind of get out of their situation. And what you see is that there are a lot of interesting stories. A lot of kind of our most important technological breakthroughs occurred during this period. Then, as intellectual property started to instantiate, and as you started to have people competing in the marketplace because there was some intrinsic value attached to coming up with an idea, prizes started to shift slightly. What they were is all of a sudden they were about how you could take an existing piece of technology and push it further, or prove that it was reliable or effective or safe or inexpensive. So you have, well, let me go back. You have this period in which it was about 50-year lull in which you don't see that many prizes. And today what we have is a tremendous amount of activity. Over the last decade, and I can show you a chart around this, we've seen this tremendous uptake. To the point that McKinsey and company did a report with us where we determined that the current size of the marketplace, or at least the size in 2009, was about $2 billion, with massive gains per year, and a lot of experimentation occurring online. But some people will attribute that to this prize. This is the Ansari X Prize. And it stated that $10 million would be paid out if a team could take a privately financed rocket, put it into outer space twice in 2 weeks, carrying the payload equivalent of 3 people, with only touch labor and fuel costs on the second flight. You have 26 teams from 7 different countries compete in the prize. They spend $100 million to win the $10 million. The $10 million is only paid after its success has been achieved, and you have 3 billion media impressions that occur both over the course of the prize and then in the years that followed it. But what's probably most important is that you had Virgin Galactic leases the winning technology from Mojave Aerospace Ventures, right? Investments in Virgin go on, so you have this multiplier effect, right? You have 2.5 million to 10 to 100, all the way up to 1.1 billion and more. So the real attraction of the prize, looking at it from the player's point of view, is not so much the one-time chance to win $10 million, right? It's that they have a company, they have an approach, they have a solution, and they want to commercialize that solution, and this is a way to bring some exposure to their approach. So in 2009, we worked with McKinsey on studying the size of this landscape and looking at prizes over the last 40 years. And you see this kind of steeply ascending curve. This is really looking at just prizes that are $100,000 or more in purse size. And really, I'll tell you, the bias going into the study was that we're really looking at prizes like the X Prize Foundation's model, where it was kind of inducements for bringing about new technology, a kind of a reward system in which it was focused on new breakthroughs. And out of the $2 billion valuation, we thought that that represented about 375 million of it. Well, this is a chart. This was, again, published in 2009. I think what it shows you here is that the largest segment at that time was kind of the nonprofit sector. But those who were making the investments were, by and large, those who established these organizations after 1995. This is what we're calling new venture philanthropy. This is people who have made their money recently, who are still alive. These are people coming out of Silicon Valley. These are people who look at philanthropy and they say, I only want to pay for results, I don't want to give away grants, and I want to do it as efficiently as possible. And so there was a huge amount of interest coming out of those groups, and that's why you see this spike here. I would say, in terms of kind of the growth segment, if you look at these others, government now is kind of the fastest growing segment among those making these investments. So on the first axis, you have these incentive rewards, right? This is the ex ante approach. This is where cash is only paid after the model has been proven. versus those recognition awards, right, ex post. The truth is that if you go and you look at other kind of inventories of existing prizes, the vast majority of prizes exist right here. Now, we're all very familiar with them, right? The Academy Awards, the Nobel Prize, Pulitzer Prize, all of that. In the last, well, since 1991, we've seen a dramatic shift, right? And so while there's still a lot of activity and there's a lot of established prizes in this ex post area, the shift is occurring dramatically, right? So you're seeing kind of 75% gain after 1991, 75% decrease after 1991. A lot more attention paid to the ex ante model. The intersecting axis is really about proofs of concepts versus concepts, ideation versus demonstration, right? So because a lot of the attention is being paid here, there's been a lot of experimentation, a lot of very bold experimentation. Here's what's happening, or here's what's happened. There has been an arms race that has occurred in this little niche sector, where the early theory was that the larger the prize purse, the more attention that would be paid to you, and the more quality participation you could attract. That has proven to be untrue entirely. And what we know now is that the Victory Project, zero participation. They're offering $1 billion. Richard Branson's a pretty smart marketeer, right? He's a pretty smart marketing guy. Zero participation. Mickelson and Grant's just kind of coming out of a slump. X Prize Foundation also suffering from the same problem. It's just not the case that the more money you offer, the more people play. With more options, with a growing marketplace, with a lot more prizes out there today, what people look for is they look for the value for those who don't win. They want clear, open, transparent process. If there isn't a clearly defined finish line, if the participation process isn't outlined clearly on the front of each website, people won't play. They just have other places to go. And this has become the kind of this distinguishing characteristics of prizes that work. Open, clear, fair, transparent process. So on the outer extreme, you have ideation for the sake of ideation, right? You have prizes as a way to source new ideas, new approaches, just to kind of discuss them and to work through them. But what's happening is, because the attraction of kind of pay for performance, right, and leverage and everything that's been promised in this segment, you have a lot of these online prizes that are starting to inch really close up to this line, right? What we're calling is reduction to practice, RTP. This is where you might have a business plan writing competition in which the winner is provided the funding to launch the company, right? This is where Hilton Hotels goes to some online prize platform and they say, you know what, we can either pay Bain or McKenzie $1 million to price our honeymoon suites, or we can go to every MBA program in the country and say we'll offer you $25,000 in a job to come up with a model that works, right? And what happens? They get the full range of the approaches. They get to hire the team, take their proposal, put it into practice, apply the model, and see how it works. Let's talk about kind of briefly what's below the fold, right? We've got all of these recognition awards. And what are they? Well, they are, you give money to some old guy, usually, right? He's already done what he's going to do. He takes the money and he goes and buys himself a beach house, and it's over. The Zayed Future Energy Prize was a Lifetime Achievement Award in clean tech. The Abu Dhabi government, the Crown Prince's Court, is building a city. They're putting $30 billion into building a zero carbon footprint city in the desert. Where, for those of you who've been to Qatar, you know it's like 135 degrees and 80% humidity in August, right? It's a brutal, brutal place. They're trying to experiment there. One of the problems that they have in the GCC and at Masdar is this churn of talent. They can't get smart people to go there and stay there. When I went there and I sat down with the CEO, I said to him, I'm very excited about this. We're going to build prizes that are going to bring forward new technologies. We're going to do all these great things. He looked at me and said, no, Jason, what we're going to do is a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I just deflated. I was like, oh, this is not worth your time or money. And what I learned is that he was actually smart to do this, because what we were doing with the Zayed Future Energy Prize is we were creating a process in which those that applied were having a very positive experience. It really was about trying to nominate and create a community of people that were going to get involved in this project and that were going to stay involved with this project. And by using this Lifetime Achievement Award, both to find kind of like these postdocs who are all over the world who are really interested in this subject matter, and these other people who had achieved great things, we could then tap into them to do other things, We could then use these networks. We could then find them when we wanted to deliver the zero carbon footprint plug-in air conditioning unit for the villa in Masdar City. Got mission and media. Since a lot of our prizes are focused on more kind of philanthropic intentions, or at least they are right now, the thing about this is that when we look at what kind of prize to create, the first thing that we really look at is kind of whether there is a market failure there or not, right? I mean, because there's a lot of activity flowing into segments like biotech and pharmaceuticals, right? Do we really need a prize in order to move the needle in that respect? Kind of what's the vacuum? What is it that we're really solving for? And oftentimes, this is either the fact that there aren't enough people dedicated to the mission or the purpose of what you're trying to achieve, or there's not enough attention, right? There's asymmetry of information. There's kind of certain other market failures that has to do with kind of regulatory environment. But kind of the combination of mission and media and how that can kind of bring more attention to the topic and the drama that's kind of a part of these competitions, that helps kind of drive participation from both of these kind of groups. The next thing we look at is how much cash do you have to put up, right? And we go through a fairly extensive exercise where we look at kind of what are the drivers for those people that we think can now already solve this problem, right? There are many examples of people who have failed to do this, and therefore they have failed to have a successful prize. Here you kind of have observers and players, and I kind of already said this, but really by creating a prize in which you're creating an attraction for both those that are going to commit to their investing in the solution and those that are going to be interested in watching it, you're really kind of creating this first mover advantage for the people that kind of come out as the top performers, right? So in the case of Lindbergh, and we're in the case of some of the other prizes I've mentioned, you have a whole industry that breaks open, and they're kind of right at the bleeding edge of that, ready to capitalize on that. Then you have this idea of kind of experts and editors, right? You have this idea that because prizes sometimes sound like carnival barking and sweepstakes and game shows, really, you need to bring a lot of credibility at the outset of the launch, at the development of the prize. People want to see who's making the decision. And this becomes even more important because where the pedigree of your experts, your judges, goes up, participation goes up only if you can provide a certain amount of value for the people that are playing, only if they have access to them. So when we engineer kind of the player experience, right, when we sit down with a client and they say, this is what we want to do, the first thing we tell them is we're not going to try and solve for what happens to the person that wins the prize. We're going to try and solve for what happens to the person that doesn't, right? And where there is even incremental value for those people, you see a tremendous uptake in activity. And there's two forms of value. We call it vertical value, the first one, and that's where you're providing feedback from those known experts to the player. And the second is the notion of kind of lateral value, and where these people can start to connect to one another. So I said there isn't a lot of research around this, but there is a guy at Harvard Business School named Karim Lakhani who wrote a great paper, The Value of Openness in Scientific Problem Solving. So what Karim did is he went through this database of all these people that were winning these prizes, and he said, wow, who are these people? Right? Where are they coming from and what do they care about? And he found some really neat stuff. So where you see like a new chemical compound prize that is one that's been launched on the Innocentive platform, you have all these disciplines, right? All these people that represent these disciplines that are kind of attacking the problem simultaneously. And what he saw was that the winners were 6 degrees or more separated from the target discipline, okay? So if you had a challenge in toxicology, right, you might think, well, we need to get a bunch of biologists, we need to get a bunch of chemists, we need to get drug pathologists involved in solving this. And what happens is it's the guy who's studying fractal algorithms over here that comes up with the answer, or crystallography. This is where the answer is coming from, right? So what does this say? Well, it says a few things. It says winners are technically or socially marginal to the problem set. You need intellectual diversity to win. I like this one where in science women are more likely to win. We don't know why. Then the fancy way of saying this is that, where you have this uncertainty, multidimensional inputs, right? Prizes create the most change. Multidimensional inputs. And what it says for us, though, is it dispels two important fallacies. The first is this notion that you've got some guy tinkering in his garage or playing around, some dilettante who's going to fix the problem, right? It's like the Good Will Hunting character we're all looking for, right? He doesn't exist, right? And so what you really have is you have these people who, the second point is that you have these people who are highly trained in their own disciplines that are applying these same kind of entrenched ways of solving problems only to a new problem set. And that becomes important when you start thinking about how you market your prize for quality participation.